The list of investment options may seem endless between 401ks, 403bs, thrift savings plans, health savings accounts, IRAs. Add to the list paying extra on your student loans or mortgages, and it can feel very overwhelming on where to even begin the conversation. And the fear of making the wrong choice is real. Speaking of making the wrong choice, it reminds me of the book, The Power of Zero, The Tax Train is Coming. It changed the way that I see investing, especially given the upcoming changes in the tax rates in 2030. So basically the concept is this: there are a ton of tax changes that are expected to expire in 2030, and there are a lot of things that would make a pretty compelling case for tax rates maybe even doubling. Think about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the national debt that we face in the United States. All these things would lead people to say, our tax rate's going to be higher or lower in the future? Most experts would say the tax rates are going to be even higher in the future. So how can we plan for that is the concept of the power of zero. And so as a result of these concepts, instead of just putting everything in a traditional 401k or traditional IRA and kind of hoping for the best, the concepts are more around Roth being the better vehicle of choice. Let's take a second to talk about all three methods. There are three main strategies you need to consider. There's traditional, Roth, and taxable. Let me ask you a question. Do you want to pay tax on the seed or the harvest? And that is just an easy way to say, when it comes to Roth, you've already paid tax on your paycheck. You've already paid tax on the money that you get. And so we'd rather let that grow for 30 years without paying taxes on all of that growth, compared to saving your entire life and then having to pay taxes on all the money that you've saved. And so that's what a traditional 401k is. And then with a taxable account, you're basically paying tax on both, a little up front and a little on the way. And each of these has pros and cons associated with it. So that's not the exact goal of this video to unpack all of that, but I do want to just set the table by showing that those three options exist for a reason. And when it comes to retirement planning, you want to have multiple options available to you because no one has a crystal ball. No one knows exactly what tax rates are going to be like in retirement. So you can take a look at this next slide and see the history of taxes. I remember the first time I saw this when I was at my second financial planning firm, and I feel like my mouth fell wide open. The reality is most people don't know that in World War II, the highest tax rate was 94%. So if you earned, I think, over $200,000 a year at the time, anything above and beyond that would get taxed, 94 cents on the dollar. So you're really incentivized not to earn any more than that, essentially. So you can see even here in the late 1970s was around the advent of the 401k. I think it was in 1979 when the 401k was actually rolled out. And so the idea is that people were getting destroyed by taxes and wanted an opportunity to shelter their taxes. And then also coupled with the fact that you're going to be in a smaller tax bracket in retirement, it made a lot of sense. Fast forward to now, and look where tax rates are. They're at pretty much historical lows. So now what we want to do is we want to put away the money now and let it grow tax-free so that should tax rates double, we're not completely going to be destroyed. Because the biggest thing that people don't think about when they have a 401k is what I like to call legislative risk. Meaning, if you've got $1 million in a 401k, a traditional 401k, and the government says, well, hey, I know that you're paying 15% in taxes right now, but times are tough. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, those are all in question. We need some extra money. We're going to change tax rates. And so now you're going to have to pay 30%. Sorry about that. That's not a position you want to find yourself in. So before we even go too much further in the whole order of operations, let's start with the basics. And that starts with the emergency fund. So my wife and I, 10 days before we got married, both of our cars died on the same day. We had to take a rental car to our wedding in Jacksonville, Florida. 2 years later, the same thing happened. Both our cars died on the same day. And I'm not talking like a small repair. I'm talking about both cars dead. We had the same tow truck driver the first go round. And so 2 years later, same thing happened, same day. My wife said, the last time this happened, something really good happened. We got married, maybe I'm pregnant. And guess what? We were pregnant. That was the day that we found out we were pregnant with our son, Freddie. So I say that to say we have had our fair share of unexpected expenses, and emergency funds go a long way to help ease the pain of an unexpected repair bill. Currently, the stats are in our country that 61% of people can't handle a $1,000 emergency without going into debt. That is a huge problem. So if you're looking to build wealth, we need to make sure that we can take care of some of the basic emergencies that are going to come up over time. We know they're going to happen. We want to take care of those first. That being said, I'm not someone that says you cannot invest until you've got 3 months of an emergency fund stashed away. I think that's a little bit silly. What I do is I help my clients get 1 month ahead first, and then we see what free cash flow they have left, and then we begin to invest at that point. We can also continue to simultaneously build up emergency funds with the goal of getting closer to 3 or 6 months over time, but it doesn't have to be one and done all or nothing. With automation especially, you can achieve multiple goals at the same time, which is great. So after the emergency fund comes the 401k employer match. Again, maybe it's a 403b, maybe it's a thrift savings plan. Thrift savings plans don't really have a match, but there are multiple account types that are similar to this where you can get an employee match. Let's break it down. If you make $100,000 a year and decide to contribute 4%, that would be $4,000 annually to this 401k. And your employer matches 50% of that 4% match, which would be $2,000 that you get matched essentially for free. So that is a 50% rate of return on your investment, guaranteed. And add that up, $4,000 on your end, $2,000 from your employer, and that's $6,000 that's now going into a 401k each and every year on autopilot, which is great. So just know when it comes to the 50% match, and maybe your employer matches up to 100%. If you put in 4% and your employer pays you $4,000 for 4%, then that's great. That's a 100% rate of return. That's going to be Las Vegas on the gambling scene. No stock market, no rental property can compete with that rate of return. So just keep that in mind. Now, if your investments in that 401k grow by say 7%, you're going to have an additional $420 at the end of the year. And at the end of the year, your 401k balance will reflect your total contributions for the year, employer matches, and any gains or losses from your investments. So let's say you start the year with $0, you contribute $6,000 between you and the employer, it grows by $420, and at the end of the year, your balance should be $6,420. And one of the benefits of the traditional 401k is that you can contribute that money from your paycheck before it ever gets taxed. So your contribution to the 401k actually lowers your total income. So as an example, if you're making $100,000 and you contribute $4,000, you're only going to get taxed on $96,000 for the year. And the investments in your 401k grow tax deferred, meaning like we said, you won't pay taxes on those earnings until you pull the money out of your retirement account in retirement. So generally you can't pull the money out before the age of 59 and a half unless there's some sort of hardship or something like that. There are a few stipulations here and there. You can take a loan out against your 401k if your 401k provider allows for that. So that can be helpful in certain situations as well. Now, these 401ks typically have very basic investment options like mutual funds and ETFs, which give you some freedom and flexibility to choose how the funds are invested. However, they're oftentimes automatically invested in what's called a target date fund. So you select your age when you're going to retire, and they'll say put you in the 2055 fund, which is going to be a mix of stocks and bonds, typically are mutual funds and bond funds that will get more and more conservative over time. I'm not a huge fan of these, particularly because typically the fees are a lot higher, and frankly, they're oftentimes more conservative than I think most people should be. I think you should be more weighted towards stocks than bonds. Again, this is just my opinion, so don't take it as specific investment advice. And lastly, you can totally do the traditional 401k if you want to get that tax write-off today. However, my preference is typically towards the Roth 401k, again, paying tax on the seed and letting that grow tax-free over time. Step 3, eliminate high interest debt. Let's talk about debt. So specifically high interest rate debt like credit cards, typically personal loans would fall into that category often, maybe even car payments depending on your interest rate there. We could have a longer conversation about getting out of debt and the best way to do that. However, I've already created a video around that, so you can check that out. I've got that linked above. And just to be clear, this is the exact method that I use for myself and my clients to help get them out of debt without doing the debt snowball, without thinking about the debt avalanche in a way that's less predicated on, having all the motivation to be gazelle intense and get out of debt like your hair's on fire. That's not how I do it. That's not how my clients do it. Just want to put that out there. Part of the reason I just want to riff on this for a second is I think so many people come to me for help with debt because they have been told for years and years and years, you can't invest unless you're out of debt. And I think that people need to be building wealth, and that as a byproduct that makes it possible for them to get and stay out of debt, they need to build emergency savings. They need to begin investing and learning these principles. And you can do that in a way where you don't have to just put your entire life on hold until you pay all your debt off. So that's my quick rant on that, but let's keep going through this process. Step 4 is maxing out the Roth IRA. So once your high interest rate debt is secured, is handled, we can move on to the Roth IRA. Now, this is a tax efficient powerhouse. And again, the beautiful thing about the Roth IRA is that you put the money in with after-tax dollars and it grows and grows and grows tax-free, which is great. And as we said earlier, this gives a lot of flexibility because tax rates could rise in the future, and that gives you some shelter from those tax increases. In 2024, you can actually only invest $7,000 into this account, and that's if you're under 50, and it's $8,000 if you're over 50. And if you earn more than $146,000 a year as a single filer or $230,000 as a joint filer, if you earn more than those numbers, you're going to have to look at going the traditional IRA route. You can still make the contribution, and you can consider the backdoor Roth by making the contribution to the traditional IRA and then doing a conversion into a Roth IRA. It's basically a life hack to where you can put all the money in a traditional IRA and then convert it into a Roth after the fact. So reach out to your tax pro for help with that. Step 5 is the HSA or health savings account if you're eligible. So you've got to have a high deductible healthcare policy before you have the permission or privilege to open up an HSA. So HSA is kind of known for having a triple tax benefit. You can put the money in pre-tax, the contributions grow tax deferred, and then the withdrawals can come out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. And one thing that people don't often know about this is you can invest the dollars inside your HSA. So it's not just like getting a rate of return like a savings account. It depends on the plan you choose, but most providers, if you've got, let's say, $1,000 in cash, you can then invest the difference over time. And so that's a great way to grow kind of a healthcare nest egg for the future. Now, step 6 is we're going to talk a little bit about college planning with the 529. So it's almost like a Roth, but for education purposes, that offers tax deferred growth that can be taken out tax-free for qualified education expenses. So 529s can be a little tricky. I'm actually just using my friend ChatGPT over here to get a couple specifics down. So you can do $17,000 per donor per beneficiary. This means that an individual can contribute up to $17,000 per year in a 529 plan for each beneficiary without incurring the federal gift tax. So for married couples, the limit is actually $34,000 if you split the gift. And then there is a 5-year election where you can superfund the 529 by contributing up to 5 times the annual gift tax exclusion amount in a single year, again, using the 5-year election rule. So that means in 2024, you can do up to $85,000, which is $17,000 times 5 per beneficiary without incurring the gift tax. A married couple can do up to $170,000, which is again, $34,000 times 5. So hopefully that makes sense. That could be an option for you if you're looking to send your little ones off to higher education. However, I think it's worth pointing out that oftentimes people can feel like they want to overfund these compared to maybe their retirement accounts. So a quick example is when you get on an airplane and the oxygen mask comes down. What is the rule? Who are you supposed to put the mask on first? We're supposed to put it on ourselves first and then take care of other people. I think the same is true when it comes to planning your finances. So meaning there are going to be people with the proclivity to want to take care of their kids' college before they take care of their retirement. And that is not a great idea. You need to take care of yourself first. As we like to say, you can always take out a loan for higher education. You can't take out a loan for retirement. So step 7 is actually back to the 401k. We want to look at maxing out the 401k if at all possible. So again, if you're going to do traditional, remember that it lowers your taxable income as well. So that's a big benefit up front, meaning you're going to pay less taxes on your current year's income. Now, there are limits, and the annual limit for 2024 is $23,000. So again, the example earlier, if you've got $100,000 of income, you put 23 of that in the 401k. So that means you're only going to pay taxes on 77,000 of your income in that year, while the rest goes to grow your retirement nest egg. And there is a catch-up provision. So if you're over 50, the government lets you put in even more money, tax deferred. So that would be $7,500 is the catch-up provision. So if you're over 50, it's actually $30,500 is the max that you can put in a given year, which is great. Now, just a quick note, you might be at this step being like, man, this sounds really lofty. This sounds really out of reach, but I want to give you some encouragement. One of the biggest hacks in financial planning is the automatic increase that's in a 401k. So a lot of these 401k plans have an option where you can click a button once and let automation take over, which you know I love, to basically say, instead of doing maybe 6%, maybe you're only at 6% this year, maybe next year you set it up to do 8% and then 10 and then 12, and you can ratchet up typically between 1 and 3% increments every year, which makes it effortless to hit these goals over time. You might not be prepared to max out your 401k the year that you're watching this video, but if you can do that one life hack, you're probably going to get a cost of living increase. Over the next couple of years, you're probably going to get a promotion or a pay raise. And so just banking on those things happening over time, which they will, you can set that automatic increase and then hit your goals on autopilot. So huge fan of these painless life hacks that make hitting your goals effortless. Okay, so step 8, if you've hit all these kind of tax advantage accounts, it's time to consider the taxable account. Although they're not really tax perks up front like a traditional or Roth, they do offer a lot of flexibility, especially if you're looking to touch money before 59 and a half, which I imagine most people in their heart of hearts would love that opportunity opportunity to do. So I actually really like these accounts and recommend them to my clients because I'm a big believer in automation, checking these boxes for us, meaning we can do multiple of these things at the same time. So I don't personally follow or necessarily recommend that everybody follow this exact order of operations to the letter, because I like to get clients a month ahead and then check multiple boxes at the same time, depending on how much income they have available at that moment. So again, if the average client has $1,000 left every month to save, invest, do all of these things, we work together to get their savings goals for Christmas and family vacation, home and auto maintenance, but also maybe tackling the Roth IRA, maybe putting some in a taxable bucket and all these things, so that at retirement, they have these multiple buckets available to them. But in a purely optimized approach like this, I do think it's important to talk about that the tax advantage account is maybe a little sub of a priority when we're looking purely at getting the most bang for our buck from a tax and an opportunity cost standpoint. So again, for example, with a taxable account, you can just open a taxable account, put some money in an S&P 500 fund or other index fund, and you'll pay taxes when you sell. You still have the flexibility to access the money when you need it. And using index funds, I think, helps lower the risk profile and just make investing really easy. Pretty set and forget it philosophy as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so next on the list would be low interest debt. Though again, just to be crystal clear, with my clients, once they're a month ahead, we're probably tackling some debt still in the background. And as we've paid off maybe high interest debt and or personal loans and that kind of stuff, if we want to begin adding some money to the lower interest debt, I think that is a great idea for people just to consider on autopilot. Just put some money towards your car payment. It doesn't have to be your all-consuming life journey to put every extra dollar until you pay that car off. I think that is a waste of time. So just important to note that these don't drain your finances like a credit card with a 30% interest rate. If you've got a 5% car loan, again, not the end of the world, but if you can do some extra damage to that loan and get that thing paid off, and then imagine a world where you don't have a car payment. Imagine a world where instead of a $500 car payment, you're now paying yourself $500 into an index fund that's going to grow at 7 to 10% over time. And so that's going to help you get that next car a lot faster. So needless to say, I'm a big fan of paying off as much debt as possible. I think that is ultimately what's optimal, to never have a car payment. And the last step is to pay off your mortgage. I just want to be clear here. My personal view on this is, hey, that's great if you want to, but I think the math plays out that unless you have like a 10% mortgage, it's going to make more sense to invest the difference in index funds. When we look at a 30-year period, I think you're going to be way better off to be able to pay off the mortgage much sooner and write a check and pay it off, or just have a lot more freedom, flexibility, liquidity, and options compared to just putting every extra penny you have on the mortgage. However, then, and even with that in mind, I think a lot of people can benefit from just the thought exercise of viewing your entire investment portfolio as well as your mortgage as one giant portfolio. Meaning, if we have $1,000 a month, hypothetically, and instead of just saying putting all $1,000 in index funds, what does it look like to maybe put, even $100 a month on the mortgage, and think of like 90-10, 90% going into equities, 10% going into this fixed income bucket. In this example, it's a mortgage. It's not actually bonds per se, but I do like the idea for people that might want to just make a dent on their mortgage, make some traction, get ahead in some way, shape, or form. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. To kind of know yourself as far as this stuff goes, and there are plenty of people that just want to not have a mortgage payment, and there's nothing wrong with that. So again, just an idea. If you really want the feeling of being mortgage free, then by all means, go for it, pay that thing off. Okay, so in my humble opinion, these are the optimal steps, the order of operations. Again, maybe optimal in a vacuum, but I think it's worth having the conversation for people to kind of find out what's possible through this. Now, one of the challenges I see with clients and with everybody, I think, is you might have these desires to implement all these steps, but one roadblock is our never-ending desire to buy stuff. And I've got a video right here on how to fight that. Now, consider subscribing, as I'm always sharing tips on how to help high-income earners maximize your money and manage it with automation. And if you want to automate your finances to reach your freedom faster, you can actually apply for a free consultation down in the link below. Thanks for watching.